evening, everyone. I'm Dyotima. I welcome you all to the Wow Vanguard presentation, round one, today to be presented by Lanford on the topic Family Ties and Older Adult Well-being, Incorporating Social Networks and Proximity. Before starting the presentation, I will shortly introduce Lanford. Lanford holds a Masters of Arts in Human Rights, Governance and Development, as well as a master's degree in social work and community development from the University of Zambia. He is currently pursuing a PhD in developmental studies. Through his fellowship, he aspires to acquire advanced scientific and research skills that will enhance his knowledge base and ultimately enable him to contribute to high impact scholarly publications. I welcome Lanford to continue with his presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. My presentation title is Family Ties and Older Adult Wellbeing, Incorporating Social Networks and Proximity. This study was done by Sarah E. Patterson and Rachel McGoins. This study looked at how family ties impact well-being of older adults. Going to the introduction, this study examined the impact of family ties on the well-being of older adults in the United States. This study, the scholars in this study categorized older adults into 4 groups, which is those that were close to the family, and the kinless, those without partner or children, and those who were categorized as distanced, and those that were disconnected. Disconnected, meaning in this context, they looked at those that lacked social network ties or location data for those that had close kin. So the relevance of this study actually looks at how family structures and social networks influence the well-being of older adults. Next slide. Okay, so the study underscores the dual importance of family proximity and social network quality in shaping older adults, because it is believed that the quality of life of the older adults, it's basically rather, it is based on how connected they are with their families. Next slide. Okay, coming to the literature, there has been a number of studies that has been done in relation to family ties, and one of them was done by Russell and colleagues, which looked at families to be the first primary socialization agent, and they looked at this to be families often serve as a frontline caregivers, even to those older adults that are institutionalized. So in this case, this study looked at families to be becoming first in caregiving. Also, there were studies also that looked at demographic shifts, and those we can point out to Agree, Brown, and Lin, which looked at the shifts that happens during the life course of older adults. And there's been a lot of changes in terms of children, then to later age, marriage rates, and increased later life divorce, leading to more adults being kinless or without a partner or children. We can go to the next slide. Okay, in this study, there's been 2 models that has been used. There is one which looked at the unmet needs model, and the other one looked at the convoy model. So when we look at the unmet needs, unmet needs model suggests that that unmet needs for daily activities can lead to poorer mental health and restricted social activity. And the convoy model, this views social relationships as a convoy, meaning it emphasizes on the quality of family ties that one has over quantity. So an individual may have a lot of family relationships, but the quality of those connections that that person has is what matters. And this is what the convoy model suggests. Next slide. Coming to the methods, this study looked at the sample size of 24,818 person waves, and this sample was actually pulled from the National Health and Aging Trends study, and the data that was looked at, what was being analyzed was from 2015 to 2019, and it included older adults that were 70 plus and older. The data analysis that was used in this study was multivariate ordinary least squares regression. And the family ties classification was categorized into 4 groups, which is a close, kinless, distanced, disconnected. When we talk about distanced, they were looking at the proximity of the networks that the older adults had and how close they were in terms of their social activity. Next slide. The results findings, and this just gives us the prevalency of family ties of older adults aged 70 plus, from the period of 2015 to 2019. And when you look at, in this study, they looked at the 4 family ties, which they grouped into 4, which is 1 close, kinless, distanced, and disconnected, of which a huge percentage was 58.0 that went to the close, and kinless 5.0, distanced was 9.0, and disconnected accounted for 27.4%. You can go to the next slide. So looking at the demographic data that was actually analyzed, it has been highlighted that the diversity and complexity of family connections among these older adults existed, and a significant portion of these older adults lack strong family ties, either geographically or socially, or either both. So the data that was looked at in those 4 groups, they looked at the close, kin, and distanced, and disconnected, and these also included older adults that were institutionalized and those that were in community care. You can go to the next slide. Okay, here is the sample characteristics that that was given, rather that was analyzed in this study by the scholars that conducted this study, and they looked at certain variables that were included, and our focus, we are going to look at how kinless and disconnected older adults were reported in terms of mental health and social activity. And as you can see, the results shows kinless and disconnected older adults reported lower mental health health scores as opposed to those that were closed. So when you look at these samples, according to the p-values that in this study, it was significant that the kinless and disconnected older adults experienced lower mental health scores. Also, kinless and disconnected older adults are less socially active than respondents who were close to their families. So the results also indicated that kinless older adults tend to be more socially, racially, and ethnic, ethnic, ethnically diverse, with significantly lower household incomes than those close to the family. Again, when we look at the results from for the unmet needs that were discounted for self-care, mobility, and household tasks. When we look at these, the results shows 14.4% of older adults aged 70 and older had reported unmet needs, and the significant difference between family ties, kinless, which is 17.1%, and distanced had also 17.9%, and disconnected 15.9% of the older adults, all much more likely than the ones that were actually accounted for, which is 12.8% of older adults who reported unmet needs. We can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. This is basically what I was just from explaining. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So an ordinary least squares multivariate regression analysis was done to assess the relationship between family ties and mental health and social activity. So these were the statistics that were done, and the interpretation is on the next slide. We move to the next slide. Thank you. So when the statistics were done, assessing the relationship between family ties and mental health and social activity, mental health findings, it was observed that kinless and disconnected older adults had lower mental health scores compared to those that were close to their families. And there was no significant difference in mental health between the close and distant older adults. And on the social activity findings were that kinless older adults have much lower social participation, and disconnected older adults had also lower social activity, with no differences in social activity between close and distance older adults. Next slide. Okay, so family ties impact both mental health and social activity according to the study, and that kinless and disconnected older adults faced greatest disadvantages, and that they were more likely to report emotional and social isolation, which affected their mental health and ability to engage in social activities, because there's been a lot of emotional distress in terms of mockery from the public. And also distanced older adults fare similarly those close family, with the findings that suggest that the quality of social relationships may be more important than geographical proximity for the well-being. So in a nutshell, this study was just focusing on the quality that is there in family ties as compared to the quantity. Can move to the next slide. Okay. In the discussion, family relationships, they vary significantly on older adults' well-being, and it was observed that the ties depended on the presence of family ties, proximity of kin, and a social net connection to those kin. Thereby, the outcomes were influenced by the quality and strength of those family ties that the older adults belonged to, not just their existence, but the quality that they had may have the impact on their well-being. So strong, meaningful family connections are crucial for older adults' mental health and social engagement. Next slide. Kinless older adults have worse mental health and lower social activity than those close to their family. Similar findings were also observed from Canada by the study that was done by Margolis in 2022 and his colleagues, which indicated that kinless older adults reported higher loneliness and lower civic participation because they felt like they were isolated from most of the activities. And then distanced older adults represented 9% of older adults aged 70 plus, and that they were not disadvantaged compared to those that were close to their family on mental health or social activity outcomes in their bivariate or multivariate analysis. So here they are saying proximity matters less than the presence and the quality of family connections. This is according to the study that was analyzed on the distanced older adults. Next slide. All categories, it was observed that all categories of disconnected older adults, be it divorced, widowed, partnered, they showed worse mental health and social activities compared to those that were close to the group. Distanced older adults exhibited more negative outcomes across both mental health and social activity, regardless of their marital status. Next slide. Categories of unmet needs. So unmet needs in this study, it was contextualized in terms of self-care, mobility, household help, and it was observed that kinless, distanced, and disconnected older adults are more likely to report unmet household help needs compared to those that were close to their family, and that there are no significant difference in unmet needs for self-care and mobility across family tie groups. Overall, unmet needs do not mediate the relationship between family ties and well-being, and that older adults may fulfill their care needs through alternative methods such as adaptive equipment, non-family support, or paid care. Next slide. In conclusion, this paper underscored the diverse nature of family ties among older adults in the United States and their significant impact on well-being. As family dynamics continue to change, it is critical to understand the sources of social support and caregiving of these elements, as they play a pivotal role in aging well. So examining these factors may influence the lives of older adults and help them better inform policies and practices aimed at enhancing the quality of life in the evolving social landscape. Future research, as it was indicated in the methods that was used, the data was pulled from the National Health Aging Trends Study, which was defined by the same, either the respondents in this study are resided in the same household or within the same city. So some cities are large compared to the city that this study was undertaken, which might lead to potential measurement errors. And suggestions for future research is that more exploration on alternative measures of proximity, for example, within 10 minutes for better understanding of intergenerational support, as not just just focusing on what was looked at in this study. Also, future study can also investigate whether distanced older adults differ in health outcomes compared to those that were closer to the family. Next slide. Okay, so thank you so much. This is the end of this presentation.
Thank you, Lanford, for your presentation. Now the floor is open for Q&A session. Please put your questions in chat box. I see no questions, so uh, thank you, Lenford. Thank you, everyone, for attending the presentation.